They say Montecito is paradise, a place where the ocean sparkles like liquid glass at sunrise, where palm trees sway gently over winding streets lined with million-dollar estates. A place where secrets are whispered behind garden walls and gated entrances, and the wealthy come to breathe, to hide, to live their lives out of the relentless glare of public scrutiny. But what happens when paradise starts to crack? When the polished veneer of wealth, loyalty, and power begins to reveal something far more fragile, far more dangerous. That question brings us here today, to one property, one mansion, one shocking revelation that has Hollywood insiders, royal watchers, and financial analysts alike questioning the stability of worlds they thought untouchable. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. In the very first few seconds of this story, you need to understand the stakes. We're not just talking about a home being listed for sale. We're talking about a $14 million Montecito mansion tied to Tyler Perry, a man whose name is synonymous with influence, loyalty, and meticulous control over his empire. We're talking about timing that doesn't just hint at financial maneuvering, but suggests something more complex, more urgent, and, dare we say, dramatic. But here's the real kicker. There are rumors swirling that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle may be entangled in this web, struggling to manage debts that aren't just numbers on a page, but potential catalysts for scandal. And while we cannot confirm every detail, the implications are enough to make any observer pause, to make anyone who thought they understood the dynamics of power and money reconsider what they thought was impossible. Let's start with a simple, yet unsettling, question. Why now? Why, after years of public attention, does this mansion appear on the market at this precise moment? In Montecito, timing is everything. Every public appearance, every sale, every word uttered in interviews is calculated. And yet, this listing seems to have slipped out like a secret too heavy to hold in silence. Was it planned? Was it forced? Or is it the first visible sign of pressure, strain, and perhaps even betrayal? The answers are unclear, but the clues are all around us. And that is exactly what makes this story so compelling. Think about the mansion itself. Not just its size or its luxury finishes, but what it represents. Montecito is more than a neighborhood. It is a symbol. Security, privacy, power, and prestige. A house in Montecito is a statement. A $14 million house. That is a fortress, a prize, and a stage all in one. And when someone like Tyler Perry, known for wielding influence with subtlety and discretion, puts such a fortress on the market, it sends ripples through multiple circles of power. Hollywood insiders don't just whisper why. They ask, what has changed that makes this the only option? Because in circles where money is fluid and loyalty is currency, every action is both a statement and a test. But the story isn't just about Perry. It's about the people who orbit him, the allies he has supported, and the whispers that follow those whose fortunes are tied to his. Rumors have emerged that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, themselves no strangers to financial scrutiny, are facing challenges in meeting obligations they once seemed poised to ignore. These aren't ordinary debts. These are obligations tied to lifestyle, to ongoing projects, to arrangements that were meant to ensure security while maintaining discretion. And now, according to sources who have spoken on condition of anonymity, cracks are beginning to show. Imagine, for a moment, the tension, a world-famous Hollywood mogul deciding whether to sell his estate, while royals across the Atlantic are allegedly struggling to cover debts, all under the ever-watchful eye of an audience eager for any hint of drama. The scene is set, the stage is Montecito, and the players are, in every sense, high stakes. But let's step back for a second. You may be wondering, why does any of this matter to us, sitting in front of screens, oceans away? Why should we care about a mansion listing, about whispers of financial strain, about the timing of an estate sale? Because this is a microcosm of the invisible forces that govern wealth and influence. Because in these choices, in these hidden negotiations, we can see patterns that mirror larger truths about power, loyalty, and human behavior. Because, ultimately, these are the stories that remind us that no matter how high the pedestal, no matter how untouchable the status, everyone is vulnerable to circumstance, miscalculation, and pressure. And when those forces collide, Even the most carefully curated lives can unravel in ways that shock the world. Now let's talk about timing. Every move in Montecito, every decision tied to property, is observed and analyzed by people who are accustomed to reading between the lines. And this is why the listing itself is so striking. It appears sudden, but insiders suggest it has been under consideration for months, if not longer. The difference now is urgency. Something has shifted, something that compels action that cannot wait. Perhaps it is financial pressure. Perhaps it is strategic repositioning. Perhaps it is something else entirely, something that Tyler Perry himself has yet to address publicly. And that is what fuels speculation, what keeps journalists, analysts, and fans alike turning their heads, trying to piece together the story behind the sale. Let's layer in another element, the human factor. Behind every mansion, behind every public image, there are people, individuals with hopes, fears, and vulnerabilities. The mansion may be a financial instrument, a symbol of power, or a luxurious retreat, but to those involved, it carries personal stakes that transcend monetary value. Emotional bonds, reputational considerations, and the desire to maintain influence all intersect in ways that are impossible to ignore. It's one thing to sell a property. It's another to navigate the relationships, expectations, and pressures that come along with it. And when those pressures involve high-profile individuals like Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, the stakes are exponentially higher. Every decision becomes a story, and every story becomes fodder for speculation. And here's where the plot thickens. There are reports that the timing of this sale aligns with certain developments in other parts of Tyler Perry's business and personal life. Ventures that were once stable may now be under reassessment. Relationships that seemed secure may be strained. Public appearances that once suggested confidence now invite questions about underlying realities. In other words, the mansion sale is not an isolated event. It is part of a larger, unfolding narrative. A story that intersects with wealth, loyalty, pressure, and exposure in ways that few could have anticipated. And while we don't have all the pieces yet, the ones we do have are enough to demand attention. Now, let's engage directly with you, the viewer. How would you feel if you were watching your closest allies struggle financially, knowing that every move you made could either alleviate the situation or accelerate it? How would you navigate loyalty when it intersects with money, power, and public perception? These are questions that are rarely asked and even more rarely answered. But they sit at the heart of this story, because the sale of a mansion, in this context, is never just about bricks and mortar. It is about strategy, about survival, and about the complex web of relationships that define success, and sometimes threaten to undo it. And yet, there is still more to come. Behind closed doors, insiders say that discussions have taken place that most of the public will never hear about. Conversations that weigh financial responsibility against personal loyalty. Negotiations that balance public perception with private reality. Decisions that could have ramifications far beyond the gates of Montecito. And the most fascinating part? None of this has been confirmed officially. We are left with pieces, hints, and whispers. And the tantalizing question of what will happen next. So here is the mini cliffhanger for our introduction. The sale of Tyler Perry's Montecito mansion is not just a real estate transaction. It is a window into a world where loyalty is tested, where wealth can be both a shield and a liability, and where timing can make or break reputations. The decisions made in the next few weeks may reveal more than anyone anticipated. And for those watching closely, the story has only just begun. What came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. They say that in Montecito, the houses are more than just buildings, they're statements. And yet, for all the security systems, manicured lawns, and ocean views that seem designed to signal permanence, one mansion now threatens to rewrite the rules. Tyler Perry's $14 million estate wasn't supposed to move. That much is clear. Everyone who knows Montecito knows that when a property like this is listed, it's not a casual decision. It's deliberate. It's strategic. And when it appears on the market, it's almost always a signal that something beneath the surface is shifting, that a narrative is quietly changing in ways the public cannot yet see. Let's start with the mansion itself. Sitting on sprawling acreage with panoramic views of the Pacific, the property is everything you imagine when you think of Montecito luxury. Expansive living spaces, private gardens, infinity pools, and goose houses tucked away behind lush foliage. Every detail screams meticulous planning, every corner carefully curated to convey sophistication, privacy, and control. And that's precisely why its appearance on the market is so jarring. Properties like this don't just sell, they are passed on strategically, often within networks of trusted associates or quietly held until the right moment. To put it bluntly, this wasn't supposed to be for sale now. Not like this. So why is it? Why does a house that has been a symbol of permanence suddenly become negotiable, suddenly become liquid, suddenly become vulnerable to the whims of the market? Here, the answer is murky, tangled in speculation, rumor, and the kind of insider chatter that only occasionally leaks beyond closed doors. What we do know is that real estate decisions at this level are rarely about money alone. Yes, $14 million is a significant sum, but for Tyler Perry, whose empire spans film, theater, and philanthropy, the number itself isn't shocking. What is shocking is the timing, the context, and the pressures that reportedly surrounded this decision. Let's talk about timing. Montecito isn't just a neighborhood, it's a microcosm of wealth and influence. Every action is observed, every transaction dissected by people who operate in overlapping worlds of finance, fame, and reputation. And in that ecosystem, the decision to sell a home is never purely personal. There are ripples, there are questions, there are consequences. That is why insiders are watching closely, not just at the listing itself, but at the potential cascade of events it might trigger. A property on the market can spark rumors, unsettle associates, and force other players into the open. And that seems to be exactly what's happening here. But beyond timing and optics, there is history. Tyler Perry didn't acquire this estate on a whim. It is part of a broader pattern, a fortress of privacy, a personal retreat, a symbol of stability amid Hollywood chaos. Owning a mansion in Montecito is not simply about comfort. It is about control. It is about signaling to those in your orbit that you are untouchable, insulated, and deliberate. And when that fortress becomes negotiable, it suggests a shift, not just in assets, but in strategy, in perception, in influence. Now, layer in the human element. A mansion is more than a set of walls. It is memory, it is sanctuary, it is relationship. Every decision about it carries weight far beyond the price tag. Who moves in, who stays, who is allowed access. All of it tells a story. For Perry, known for blending personal and professional spheres seamlessly, this estate was not just a residence. It was a hub of loyalty, hospitality, and power. To consider selling it is to acknowledge that circumstances may have changed, circumstances that might include financial pressures, strategic pivots, or a recalibration of trust within his network. And that brings us to the whispers. Rumors that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, far from the gates of Montecito but deeply entwined in overlapping social and financial circles, are struggling to meet obligations tied to lifestyle, projects, and arrangements that were once comfortably covered. These whispers are unverified, but they are persistent. They suggest that the listing is not merely a personal choice. It is a response to external pressures, a move that could reflect broader consequences affecting people whose identities and reputations are as high profile as the estate itself. Here's the critical point. Real estate at this level is rarely about convenience. It is about leverage, about timing, about narrative control. To sell a home like this, especially when it's tied to one's personal brand and strategic relationships, is to make a statement. And those who are paying attention know it. They know that the appearance of this property on the market could signal recalibration, a redistribution of influence, or a preparation for an event that the public has yet to see. But let's zoom in on the mansion as a symbol. Montecito is a place where the elite not only live but also perform status, carefully curated both to impress and to protect. The architecture, the views, the amenities, all are part of a narrative of success. Selling the property interrupts that narrative. It creates tension. It creates speculation. It forces the public to ask questions. Why now? What does this change? Who is affected? And perhaps most importantly, what remains hidden behind those gates? Imagine the conversations happening behind closed doors. Tyler Perry, known for his precision and his carefully managed public image, must weigh not only financial considerations, but relational ones. Every potential buyer, every agent, every friend or associate who sees the listing becomes part of a delicate equation. Reputation, loyalty, timing, perception, they all intersect here, and a misstep could reverberate far beyond Montecito's boundaries. And then there's the psychological dimension. Selling a property like this is not just a financial decision, it's an emotional one. Even someone as disciplined as Perry cannot ignore the human weight of letting go. Every room has memories. Every view has significance. Every wall holds stories that can't be replicated elsewhere. And when you add the pressure of public scrutiny and high-profile connections, the stakes become magnified exponentially. Let's pause to consider the broader implications. The mansion sale could trigger a domino effect, not just in Hollywood, but across the social circles that intersect with royalty, business, and entertainment. If there are financial strains, if obligations are unmet, if loyalty is tested, then this is the spark that can ignite a chain reaction. And that's why the listing matters, not just as a transaction, but as a lens into the complex interplay of power, wealth, and influence. Finally, consider the audience for a moment. You are watching, reading, following, because you sense the tension. You understand, instinctively, that this is more than just real estate. This is a story of strategy, of hidden pressures, of human complexity playing out on a stage of wealth and visibility. And that is exactly what makes it compelling. The mansion is the first visible clue, the opening note of a symphony of intrigue that will unfold in ways no one can predict. And now, the mini cliffhanger. Tyler Perry's Montecito mansion was never supposed to move, and yet it has appeared on the market. That single act, simple and direct, has sent shockwaves through multiple circles of influence. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The story is just beginning, and the real intrigue is still lurking behind the gates, waiting to be revealed. He rarely speaks, and when he does, the world listens. Not because of loud declarations or sensational headlines, but because every word, every action, every choice carries weight. Tyler Perry is not just a filmmaker or a playwright. He is a force, a strategist, a man who built an empire from scratch, layer by layer, story by story, and who has navigated Hollywood with a combination of discipline, charisma, and an almost surgical understanding of influence. To understand why the Montecito mansion listing matters, you first have to understand the man behind it, the silent power broker who rarely lets the world glimpse his true motives. Imagine the contrast. A man whose name commands respect across industries, from entertainment to philanthropy, choosing to act quietly in a world addicted to spectacle. In Hollywood, where every move is scrutinized, where every word is dissected for subtext, Perry is almost anomalous. He understands the power of silence. He understands that control is not just about money or influence. It's about managing perception, directing narratives without the audience ever realizing they're being guided. And yet, here he is, a mansion listed for sale, a property that should have been untouchable. And suddenly the question arises, why now? Let's consider what makes Tyler Perry unique. Many powerful figures rely on visibility to maintain dominance. They use public appearances, media coverage, and social media engagement to assert relevance. Perry does the opposite. He operates behind the curtain, orchestrating success from the shadows, allowing his work and influence to speak for him. And that is why this mansion sale is so noteworthy. When someone who thrives on discretion makes a move that is so visible, it is rarely about aesthetics or convenience. It is about necessity. It is about strategy. It is about survival. And possibly signaling something to those within his sphere of influence. Silence is Perry's weapon. His career demonstrates that he understands the mechanics of loyalty, of influence, and of power in ways that many overlook. He nurtures relationships meticulously, aligning with allies who share values or mutual benefits, while quietly distancing himself from elements that threaten stability. This is why the mansion, which should be a private haven, becomes a story the moment it is listed. It's a signal to those who are paying attention, a subtle message that perhaps everything is not as stable as it appears. And in a world where money, fame, and trust intersect, subtle messages can carry explosive weight. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Perry's approach is not just about maintaining control, It's about testing loyalty. He understands that the people around him will inevitably respond to pressure, that financial strain, opportunity, or rumor will reveal true allegiances. By placing the Montecito mansion on the market, intentionally or otherwise, he is introducing a variable into his ecosystem, a situation that may expose vulnerabilities, reveal intentions, or trigger action from those whose behavior he has long monitored. This is not speculation. This is a pattern observed repeatedly in industries where influence is currency and where trust is as valuable as any property or asset. Now, let's think about the relationships this decision touches. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, though geographically distant, are rumored to be connected indirectly to some of the pressures surrounding Perry's network. Again, these are whispers, not confirmed reports, but they are persistent enough to warrant attention. If the timing of this listing aligns with financial obligations that they allegedly cannot meet, then the mansion is no longer just a residence. It becomes a barometer of influence, a test of who can withstand scrutiny and who cannot. It is as if the estate itself is a chessboard, and every square, every move, carries consequences. And yet, Perry's silence amplifies curiosity. He rarely responds to public speculation. He rarely confirms or denies rumors. He allows others to interpret his actions, to assign meaning, to overanalyze. This creates a vacuum of information that magnifies every gesture, every listing, every sale. In the case of Montecito, that silence is deafening. The absence of explanation fuels speculation about financial stress, strategic repositioning, or even conflicts with those in his orbit. And the more people speculate, the more powerful the narrative becomes, without him ever saying a word. Consider also the psychological effect of Perry's discretion on his associates. When someone of his stature acts without explanation, those around him are forced to interpret intentions, weigh potential outcomes, and navigate their own responses carefully. Loyalty is tested, alliances are reconsidered, and the faintest hint of instability can ripple outward. The mansion listing, in this context, is not just a real estate decision. It is a social experiment, a probe into the resilience of relationships, a moment that reveals who remains aligned and who might be ready to pivot. Let's examine his past patterns. Tyler Perry has always cultivated power through subtlety, using his productions, his philanthropy, and his carefully managed persona to command respect and maintain influence. He rarely relies on external validation or public displays. When he does act, it is with intention. Every detail is calculated, from the timing of a film release to the choice of partners for business ventures. The Montecito mansion does not exist outside this pattern. It fits perfectly into a history of deliberate, controlled decisions that maximize leverage while minimizing exposure. And yet, despite his careful management, the listing has sent shockwaves. Media outlets, industry insiders, and social commentators are all speculating about the reasons behind this unprecedented move. Financial observers question liquidity and debt pressures. Hollywood watchers question loyalty and alliances. Royal analysts watch the timing, wondering how interconnected worlds might be affected. The ripple effects of one property being listed in Montecito extend far beyond the gates, touching individuals and networks that have long relied on discretion, control, and predictability. Now, consider the stakes in human terms. Perry's reputation is built not just on talent, but on perception. The idea that he is untouchable, strategic, and unwavering. A sudden, visible action like listing a mansion can suggest vulnerability, even if that vulnerability is carefully controlled. And when those closest to him see this move, they may question stability, loyalty, and commitment. The sale is a signal, a litmus test, a moment that forces reflection and action. It is subtle, yet profound, and it is exactly why observers around the world are paying attention. So what does it mean to be a silent power broker? It means you wield influence not through noise, but through control. It means you make moves that others only understand in retrospect. It means that a single decision, a mansion listed for sale, can communicate volumes without a single word spoken. And when the world speculates, when whispers spread about financial strain, unmet obligations, and high-profile stressors, the silence becomes a tool, a shield, and a weapon all at once. But the real intrigue, the tension that keeps people watching, is that Tyler Perry rarely leaves anything to chance. Every action is intentional. Every listing, every rumor, every hint of disruption is carefully evaluated for its impact on relationships, reputation, and influence. And that is why the Montecito mansion cannot be viewed in isolation. It is a chapter in a larger story. A story that intersects with wealth, loyalty, and pressure in ways that may have long-term consequences for everyone involved, including those whose struggles are whispered about in the same breath. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. And now, the cliffhanger. Tyler Perry, the man who rarely speaks and whose every move is deliberate, has placed his Montecito mansion on the market. Silence, influence, and calculation collide in a way that has the world asking the same question. What comes next? Because behind those gates, beyond the ocean views, and within the walls of that estate, the next move may redefine relationships, loyalty, and power, and no one is ready for the fallout that could follow. They say help is easy until it isn't. At first glance, offering support to someone in need seems noble, even effortless. But in high-stakes circles, Hollywood, royalty-adjacent networks, and elite financial ecosystems, support carries invisible weights. It is never just money. It is expectation, responsibility, and, at times, a quiet, unspoken contract. And when support starts to strain, it reveals more than financial tension. It exposes human fragility, loyalty under pressure, and the often invisible costs of living in a world where appearances are everything. Let's begin with the obvious. Tyler Perry has long been known for extending support. He has mentored, he has invested, and he has helped navigate crises behind closed doors. From actors in his productions to emerging filmmakers, many owe at least part of their careers, stability, or resources to his guidance. And yet, as anyone in his orbit can attest, support comes with conditions, sometimes explicit, often implied. Loyalty, discretion, reliability, these are not optional. They are currency. And when expectations are not met, the strain becomes visible, even if the world outside sees only glamour and success. Now, consider the scenario when support starts to crack. Imagine that resources, once plentiful, are now constrained. Imagine obligations that were assumed to be manageable suddenly growing heavier. Imagine allies whose commitment is tested by circumstances they didn't anticipate. What happens then? Pressure mounts. Tension grows. Relationships are tested in ways that rarely leave public traces. In the context of the Montecito mansion, this dynamic is critical. The sale may not simply be about liquidity. It may reflect a broader strategy to recalibrate support systems, to redistribute responsibilities, or to signal to those around him that no one is untouchable. And here's where it becomes even more complex: the human factor. We often forget that behind these stories of power and wealth are real people, individuals with emotions, fears, and thresholds. Support, while generous, can quickly evolve into burden. Financial aid can become expectation, mentorship can become obligation, and loyalty can turn into silent debt. When someone like Prince Harry or Meghan Markle is alleged to struggle with obligations connected to this ecosystem, it isn't just about missing payments. It's about relationships, trust, and the emotional toll of navigating high-pressure networks where failure has amplified consequences. Think about it in personal terms. When you offer help, there is often an emotional investment. You want the person to succeed, to thrive, to reflect positively on your judgment. But what if they falter? What if they fail to live up to the standards you assumed were clear? Suddenly, support is no longer purely generous. It is tentative. It is cautious. It is fraught with tension. And in elite circles, where reputations are public and mistakes are magnified, the consequences are intensified. What might be a minor setback in one context becomes a crisis in another. Now, let's layer in perspective. The people around Tyler Perry are not just acquaintances. They are individuals whose careers, lives, and public perception intersect with his influence. When someone receives support from a figure of his stature, it is a form of currency. It buys opportunity, protection, and access, but it also buys scrutiny. It buys accountability. And when obligations are not met, or when pressures mount beyond expectations, the strain is inevitable. The mansion listing could be the first visible symptom of this underlying tension, a subtle recalibration of resources and influence in response to circumstances that cannot be ignored. Consider also the psychological dimension of strained support. Generosity, at its core, is an emotional investment. When it is taken for granted, ignored, or mishandled, it triggers disappointment, frustration, and sometimes a reassessment of priorities. The very act of offering support creates a relationship of reciprocity, even if unspoken. And when one party fails to meet their side of that unspoken contract, the implications ripple through networks, creating pressure points that can manifest in surprising ways, such as a sudden, highly visible property sale. The irony is palpable. A mansion, designed as a sanctuary, becomes a focal point for speculation precisely because support has shifted from being generous to being strained. And while the public sees only a listing, insiders see the mechanics at play. The redistribution of responsibilities, the subtle signals sent to allies, and the pressure applied to ensure alignment with expectations. The sale is simultaneously practical and symbolic, a concrete action that communicates intangible truths about loyalty, obligation, and power. At this point, it's worth pausing to consider the broader implications for those allegedly involved. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, for instance, are rumored to be under scrutiny for financial obligations that intersect with this ecosystem of support. Whether these obligations are literal debts, misaligned expectations, or perceived failures to uphold commitments, the effect is the same. Tension rises, alliances are tested, and actions become fraught with meaning. The mansion listing, in this context, is not just a real estate move. It is a bellwether, a signal that shifts in support are no longer private matters. And let's not underestimate the public perception factor. When support becomes strained, rumors circulate. Analysts dissect transactions. Media outlets speculate on motives. The court of public opinion interprets every move, often with limited information. The visibility of Tyler Perry's actions, combined with his reputation for discretion, creates a paradox. The more silent he remains, the louder the narrative becomes. And the mansion, suddenly on the market, becomes a canvas on which observers project theories, fears, and assumptions. The emotional stakes are high. For those receiving support, there is pressure to maintain appearances, to meet expectations, and to navigate relationships without jeopardizing trust. For the provider of support, there is the delicate task of enforcing boundaries without alienating allies or undermining influence. When these forces collide, the result is tension that is invisible to most, yet palpable to anyone paying attention. And when that tension reaches a critical mass, tangible actions, like selling a multi-million-dollar mansion, can become necessary, not just to manage resources, but to manage relationships, perception, and the balance of power. The dynamics of strained support also reveal human contradictions. Generosity can coexist with frustration. Loyalty can coexist with disappointment. Influence can coexist with vulnerability. And when these elements intersect, decision-making becomes both art and strategy. The listing of the Montecito mansion, then, is not merely transactional. It is performative. It is strategic. It is a reflection of the complex interplay between generosity, expectation, and human limitation. So what does this mean for the people watching from the outside? It means that wealth and influence are never static. It means that loyalty, while admirable, is conditional. It means that even the most carefully managed relationships can be disrupted when support becomes strained, when obligations shift, or when expectations are unmet. And in Montecito, where visibility and perception are amplified, the consequences of strained support become unavoidable. And now, the mini cliffhanger: support, when it shifts from generosity to strain, sets off a chain reaction that can touch every corner of a network, from Hollywood insiders to global royalty. And the listing of Tyler Perry's Montecito mansion may be just the first visible sign that this delicate balance has begun to tip. But what came next would push tensions to a level no one could anticipate, and no one was prepared for the fallout that would follow. Money. It's supposed to solve problems. It's supposed to make life easier, smoother, and more secure. But in elite circles, money often does the opposite. It exposes vulnerabilities, magnifies missteps, and forces confrontations that no one wants to have. And when we talk about Tyler Perry, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle in the context of Montecito, we're not talking about casual overspending or small debts. We're talking about financial pressure at a scale where reputation, influence, and alliances all hang in the balance. The money problem no one wanted to name is precisely that. Liquidity and obligations colliding in ways that can shake even the most carefully curated worlds. Let's start with the basics. Tyler Perry is widely regarded as a financial powerhouse, an entrepreneur whose empire spans film studios, television productions, and philanthropic ventures. His influence in Hollywood is nearly unparalleled. He has built businesses, mentored talent, and created revenue streams that most could only dream of managing. And yet, even at this level, there are factors that can create tension: cash flow versus assets, obligations versus liquidity, timing versus opportunity. A $14 million mansion is not just a home. It is a symbol of financial stability, and when it goes on the market, it raises questions. Is this about strategy or necessity? Now, imagine the ripple effect. In Perry's network, there are people who have received support, investments, or loans. These are not small sums. They are resources that provide leverage, safety nets, or operational funding. And when the system supporting these individuals begins to experience strain, it creates cascading consequences. Suddenly, what was once a smooth exchange becomes a pressure point. Every obligation, every outstanding expectation suddenly carries more weight. And in a world where perception is nearly as important as reality, the implications are immense. Let's talk about Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. They are alleged to be involved in this ecosystem, though the details remain unconfirmed. What matters is the pattern: high-profile individuals, accustomed to certain levels of financial security, suddenly confronting challenges in meeting obligations. These are not just bills. They are commitments that intersect with public image, lifestyle, and long-term projects. When obligations cannot be met, the fallout isn't only financial, it's reputational, it's relational. And it's precisely this type of pressure that insiders suggest may have influenced Tyler Perry's decision regarding the Montecito estate. Financial strain in these circles is rarely obvious. Wealth can mask vulnerability. A multi-million-dollar mansion, a luxury car, or a public appearance does not equate to liquidity or freedom from debt. Assets may be illiquid, obligations may be inflexible, and the timing of income versus expenses can create critical pressure points. This is the kind of hidden stress that, when it reaches a tipping point, forces decisions that otherwise might never have been made. The listing of the Montecito mansion could be a perfect example, an action that appears simple on the surface, but is actually a calculated move to manage financial realities. Consider the psychological dimension. Money, when intertwined with relationships and obligations, becomes more than numbers. It becomes leverage. It becomes a test of loyalty. It becomes a source of tension that can reveal true intentions. Who can handle pressure? Who falters? Who adjusts? The mansion is more than property. It is an instrument of observation, a gauge for understanding how the people in Perry's orbit respond when resources are constrained and expectations are high. Now, let's examine the contradictions. Perry is immensely wealthy. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have access to considerable resources. And yet, there are reports, unverified but persistent, of financial strain. How can this be? Because money at this level is complex. Income streams are tied to projects, investments are tied to timing, and obligations may be structured in ways that create temporary, acute stress. Wealth is not synonymous with cash on hand. It is not immune to pressure. And in cases where multiple high-profile parties are involved, even minor timing misalignments can cascade into situations that demand decisive action. Layer in public perception. Money problems at this level aren't just personal, they're public. If news leaks, if speculation grows, the reputational consequences can be immense. A single poorly timed move can trigger media scrutiny, fan backlash, and scrutiny from peers and competitors alike. And that is why discretion is critical, and why the sale of the Montecito mansion is so revealing. It's a visible action that may be intended to stabilize financial perception before the pressure becomes visible to the wider world. We also need to factor in the stakes of expectations. Support and financial obligations are intertwined. When someone receives help, there's an unspoken expectation of alignment, behavior, reliability, and loyalty. When obligations aren't met, whether due to mismanagement, miscommunication, or external pressures, relationships begin to strain. The mansion listing, from this perspective, may be less about money itself and more about recalibrating the ecosystem of support and influence surrounding Perry. And here's the ironic twist. In attempting to solve or mitigate a financial problem, the sale of the mansion could generate its own ripple effects. Public speculation, rumors, and media attention could compound pressures rather than relieve them. Yet, this is the delicate balance in elite networks. Actions are simultaneously pragmatic, symbolic, and strategic. Every decision carries multiple layers of meaning, and the consequences are rarely linear. Think about it in human terms. Money is not just a number, it is power, leverage, and security. When resources become constrained, tension arises. The stress isn't confined to the ledger. It manifests in relationships, trust, and even health. And when multiple high-profile parties are involved, the stakes escalate. The mansion becomes a focal point, a visible representation of the invisible financial tension, a catalyst for speculation that touches everyone connected. The deeper truth here is that money problems in elite circles rarely operate in isolation. They intersect with loyalty, reputation, perception, and strategic positioning. They are amplified by media scrutiny, social networks, and the expectations of allies and associates. In this context, Tyler Perry's decision to list the Montecito mansion is not just about money. It is about signaling, controlling narrative, and navigating a complex web of obligations that extend far beyond property lines. Now, consider the audience watching this unfold. You are witnessing a high-stakes scenario where millions of dollars, reputations, and alliances collide. You may not feel the pressure directly, but the lessons are universal. Wealth does not guarantee freedom from stress. Obligations can complicate relationships, and timing can determine outcomes in ways that are both subtle and explosive. The money problem no one wanted to name has arrived, and the first tangible manifestation is visible on the market. And the mini cliffhanger, the sale of Tyler Perry's Montecito mansion, may seem like a real estate decision, but in truth, it is a reflection of pressures, obligations, and strategies that few will ever see directly. What happens next will push these tensions to their breaking point, and no one watching will be prepared for the consequences that follow. Montecito. A word that evokes visions of sun-drenched cliffs, rolling hills, pristine beaches, and luxury estates that stretch as far as the eye can see. To the casual observer, it is paradise, a retreat from the chaos of Hollywood, a sanctuary where the rich and famous come to breathe, to hide, to live undisturbed. But paradise has a hidden truth. It is also a microscope, a magnifying glass that exposes every crack, every misstep, every sign of strain. And for those struggling quietly behind the gates, Montecito is anything but a safe haven. Let's start with the obvious. This is not just a neighborhood. This is a high-stakes ecosystem of wealth, influence, and reputation. Every home, every car, every social engagement is scrutinized. A casual outing can become a headline. A private dinner can become fodder for speculation. And in this environment, financial stress, or the perception of it, is not easily contained. Even the quietest struggle can become visible, even when the individual takes every precaution to remain discreet. The mansion itself is central to this story. A $14 million estate with sweeping views of the Pacific is more than a residence. It is a statement. It signals stability, success, and permanence. In Montecito, these signals are everything. The homes are designed to project power, but they also serve as mirrors, reflecting not just status, but the weight of obligations, pressures, and alliances. A property going on the market is not just a financial decision. It is a public signal that something has shifted, that the equilibrium may be fragile. And the people who understand Montecito know exactly how to read that signal. Here's the paradox. Montecito is designed to be private, yet it is impossible to remain completely invisible. Gated entrances, security patrols, and secluded properties may shield residents from casual passersby, but in an enclave filled with neighbors who are themselves influential, nothing stays secret for long. Rumors travel quickly. Observations are amplified. Social networks overlap. A sudden sale, a change in routine, or a hint of financial stress becomes a topic of conversation, a clue, a signal that something is amiss. For anyone struggling, the pressure to maintain appearances is relentless. Consider the psychological impact. Living in Montecito is a form of performance. Residents are expected to project success, confidence, and control. But when private struggles intersect with this performative environment, the tension can be crushing. Every visitor, every neighbor, every social media post becomes a potential test. Even small cracks, late payments, changes in staffing, or sudden property moves can be interpreted as signs of vulnerability. The mansion sale, therefore, is not just a financial maneuver. It is a highly visible acknowledgement that the status quo has shifted. Now, layer in the social dynamics. Montecito is populated by people who are accustomed to influence, wealth, and discretion. They understand the signals, the cues, and the narratives that define power in this microcosm. If someone is struggling financially, it will be noticed. Not just by tabloids, but by those whose networks and decisions intersect with that individual. The mansion sale, then, is more than a property listing. It is a statement that the resident is responding to pressure, whether financial, relational, or both. And in an environment where perception is currency, that statement has consequences. Let's examine the optics. To the casual observer, Montecito may seem serene, even idyllic. But under the surface, it is a competitive and highly visible environment. Every choice, from home renovations to public appearances, is scrutinized. And when a high-profile property like Tyler Perry's mansion is listed, it generates a cascade of attention. Not just because of the price tag, but because in Montecito, actions are interpreted as indicators of stability, influence, and credibility. Even the rumor of financial strain can spread rapidly, affecting relationships, negotiations, and alliances across Hollywood and beyond. Now, consider the unique pressures of the mansion itself. For someone like Perry, the estate is both a sanctuary and a symbol. It represents success, control, and discretion. Selling it is not just a financial decision. It is a public acknowledgement that circumstances have changed. And in a community where privacy is a rare commodity, that acknowledgement cannot be contained. Neighbors, insiders, and observers will notice. Speculation will follow. Questions will arise. Why now? What changed? Who is affected? And perhaps most importantly, what remains hidden? Montecito also amplifies the ripple effects of strain. Unlike more dispersed or anonymous neighborhoods, this enclave is tightly connected. Actions are observed, interpreted, and often discussed in overlapping networks of influence. A financial misstep, a property sale, or a perceived lapse in discretion can have consequences far beyond the gates. It can affect partnerships, collaborations, and reputations in ways that are immediate and visible. In other words, struggling quietly is nearly impossible. The environment itself enforces transparency, whether one wishes it or not. Consider the human element. Financial and social pressures intersect with emotional realities. Stress, anxiety, and relational tension all compound in environments where appearance is everything. Even the most disciplined individuals must navigate both public perception and private obligations simultaneously. The mansion, in this sense, becomes a physical manifestation of that tension, a visible, immovable symbol of both success and vulnerability. Its sale signals that the balance has shifted, that the stress has reached a point where action is required. The irony is stark. Montecito promises safety, discretion, and peace. Yet, for those experiencing strain, it is a crucible. There is nowhere to hide. Every decision is magnified, every action scrutinized, and every misstep potentially public. Even a private sale of a private estate becomes a matter of public interest, interpreted by those who understand the nuances of influence and status. In such a context, the Montecito mansion is not merely real estate. It is a mirror, reflecting pressures that would remain invisible in less interconnected, less scrutinized environments. And here's the critical point. The challenges faced in Montecito are not just financial. They are relational, reputational, and psychological. Pressure magnifies, loyalty is tested, and the consequences of missteps extend beyond the individual to everyone in their orbit. The mansion listing is more than a transaction. It is a revelation. It is a signal that the quiet struggles are no longer contained. It is an event that forces observation, interpretation, and, inevitably, action from those connected to it. Now, consider the stakes for those allegedly involved in this network. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, as outsiders in this environment, are not immune to its pressures. Connections, obligations, and expectations extend across borders, and even distant players can be affected by visible shifts in Montecito. If financial or relational strain exists, the mansion sale becomes a focal point, a visible indicator that adjustments are underway, and that no one, even royalty, is entirely insulated from scrutiny and consequence. Finally, let's pause to reflect on the emotional undertone. Montecito is designed to be serene, luxurious, and secure. But in reality, it magnifies stress, isolates strain, and exposes vulnerabilities. A mansion like Perry's is both refuge and indicator, a place where privacy can feel like a trap when pressures mount. The sale signals a recalibration, an acknowledgement that even the most carefully constructed havens are vulnerable to the forces of obligation, loyalty, and human limitation. And now, the mini cliffhanger. Montecito may look like paradise from the outside, but behind the gates, no one struggles quietly for long. The listing of Tyler Perry's mansion is the first visible sign that pressures, obligations, and expectations have begun to surface, and what comes next will challenge relationships, reputations, and alliances in ways no one anticipated. Hollywood is a world built on proximity, relationships, and perception. Success is rarely just about talent. It is about alliances, timing, and knowing which circles to navigate carefully. In this ecosystem, silence is currency, influence is leverage, and every decision sends a signal. When a figure like Tyler Perry lists a $14 million Montecito mansion, the reverberations extend far beyond the property itself. Hollywood begins to pull back, slowly, deliberately, and with a caution that only insiders can fully grasp. Think of it like watching a city respond to a distant tremor. The initial quake may seem subtle, almost imperceptible to outsiders. But the insiders, the producers, agents, collaborators, and studio executives, sense the tremor immediately. They begin adjusting their positions, recalibrating their risk, and reassessing their alliances. The mansion listing is that tremor. At first, whispers circulate in private conversations, over secure lines, and in closed boardrooms. Hollywood does not react in panic, but in calculation. Every action is deliberate, every response measured. Why the caution? Because in Hollywood, perception is everything. A property sale, especially at this level, is interpreted as more than just a financial transaction. It is a signal about stability, priorities, and influence. If Tyler Perry, a figure known for meticulous control, chooses to sell, it cannot be dismissed as casual. It becomes a data point, a clue, and sometimes a warning. Studio executives start recalculating budgets, collaborators reconsider their commitments, and agents begin quietly assessing how this shift might affect their clients' futures. The reverberations may not be immediate or dramatic, but they are real and persistent. Now, consider the psychology of Hollywood insiders. These are people who live in high-pressure environments where information is currency. They interpret signals carefully because misreading a subtle cue can be costly. The mansion listing becomes a prism through which multiple interpretations are possible: financial pressure, strategic repositioning, or even personal recalibration. Everyone watches closely, weighs implications, and adjusts behavior accordingly. Hollywood pulls back, slowly, because no one wants to overcommit in a shifting landscape. Here's the irony. While Hollywood is an ecosystem that thrives on visibility, it simultaneously punishes premature exposure. Too much attention can destroy careers, too little can create missed opportunities. The mansion sale is public, yes, but the full context is invisible. This creates tension. Insiders know something is changing, but they do not yet know the extent. They sense the stakes, but the details are obscured. That ambiguity fuels caution, speculation, and incremental repositioning. Let's layer in human behavior. Hollywood insiders are conditioned to read signals, anticipate outcomes, and adjust accordingly. When a high-profile asset like Perry's mansion enters the market, even subtly, it triggers mental simulations. How will this affect access to capital? How will alliances shift? How will reputations be perceived if the narrative is mismanaged? Slowly, the ecosystem responds, like water flowing around a rock. There are no sudden announcements, no immediate exodus. Just careful recalibration and deliberate distance. And here's where tension rises. Hollywood is not monolithic. It is a network of interdependent actors. Every stakeholder, agents, managers, financiers, and talent, must decide how to respond. Pulling back too early signals distrust or opportunism. Waiting too long risks entanglement or missed advantages. This is the delicate dance that defines elite networks. The mansion listing becomes both the trigger and the measuring stick for these calculations, illustrating how even a single property can reshape behavioral dynamics across an entire industry. Now, consider the contrast with the public perception. Fans, media, and casual observers see a simple headline. Tyler Perry is selling his Montecito mansion. It seems straightforward, almost mundane. But Hollywood insiders interpret it differently. They read between the lines, connecting dots that outsiders cannot see. Past investments, rumored obligations, network tensions, and strategic alliances. Hollywood pulls back, slowly, because the true meaning of the move is complex, layered, and not yet fully revealed. And then there's timing. Hollywood moves in cycles. Production schedules, release dates, contract renewals, and media campaigns all operate on precise timelines. A sudden, unexpected signal, like the listing of a high-profile property, requires recalibration across multiple fronts. Studios may delay announcements. Collaborators may postpone deals. Agents may reconsider risk exposure. Even subtle changes ripple through projects, partnerships, and negotiations in ways that are often invisible to the general public but deeply consequential to those within the network. Let's layer in stakes. Hollywood insiders are risk-averse when ambiguity is high. They know that behind every decision, there may be pressures they cannot fully perceive, financial obligations, personal conflicts, or strategic repositioning. The mansion sale, while ostensibly a personal choice, communicates a signal that the network cannot ignore. Hollywood pulls back, slowly, because patience, observation, and interpretation become essential tools for navigating uncertainty. And yet, the slow pullback is also strategic. Those who remain in the orbit watch, listen, and learn. They assess reactions, gauge intentions, and anticipate next moves. The mansion is more than a property. It is a case study in influence, a live demonstration of how one decision can shape behavior across multiple layers of connection. Hollywood's measured response underscores the weight of discretion, signaling that even minor shifts can trigger significant recalibration in tightly knit networks. Now, consider the emotional dimension. Those closest to Perry, or involved in overlapping circles, experience tension silently. Concern, curiosity, anxiety, all simmer beneath polite facades. Observers are acutely aware that missteps can carry consequences for careers, reputation, and relationships. The mansion listing, by introducing ambiguity into an otherwise stable ecosystem, elevates emotional stakes. Hollywood pulls back, slowly, because both caution and curiosity demand careful management of perception and response. Finally, consider the inevitable consequences. Slow withdrawal, careful observation, and strategic recalibration are not neutral. They influence negotiations, partnerships, and decision-making at multiple levels. The mansion becomes a pivot point, illustrating how a single high-profile action can reshape behavior, influence outcomes, and reveal hidden tensions. Hollywood is adjusting its orbit around the listing, and in doing so, sets the stage for the drama, revelations, and conflicts that will unfold next. And the mini cliffhanger, Hollywood pulls back, slowly, cautiously, in response to Tyler Perry's Montecito mansion listing. But beneath that calm surface, tensions are building. Alliances are being tested, reputations quietly assessed, and pressures mounting in ways that no one outside the inner circle can fully anticipate. What happens next will shock insiders and outsiders alike, and the ripple effect is only just beginning. Whispers travel fast in Hollywood. But in Montecito, where power, wealth, and influence collide, whispers take on a life of their own. Now imagine those whispers crossing oceans, reaching corridors of royalty, and intertwining with figures whose lives are already under intense scrutiny: Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. Suddenly, the narrative is no longer contained to an elite enclave of Hollywood. It becomes a story of speculation, obligation, and high-profile tension that stretches far beyond California. These are the royal rumors in the shadows, the undercurrents that no one wants to name, but everyone wants to follow. Let's start with the nature of rumors. They are fragile, malleable, and often rooted in partial truths. A mansion listed for sale, a reported financial strain, or an unverified anecdote can be interpreted in infinite ways. In this case, the whispers suggest that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle may be struggling to meet obligations, financial or otherwise, that intersect indirectly with Tyler Perry's sphere of influence. The details remain intentionally vague, as is common in high-profile networks, but the persistent repetition of these rumors adds weight. And in a world where perception is nearly as powerful as reality, even unverified whispers can have tangible consequences. Why are these rumors significant? Because they amplify tension, shift focus, and force strategic recalibration. If insiders perceive that obligations are unmet, behavior changes. Allies become cautious. Advisors double-check assumptions. Financial networks adjust exposure. Reputation is reassessed. And while the general public sees only headlines, the people within these intertwined circles understand the stakes: high, personal, and potentially explosive. The Montecito mansion becomes the pivot point. It is the visible element in an otherwise hidden narrative. To the public, it is a property listing. To insiders, it is a signal, a tangible manifestation of financial and relational tension. When whispers about royal involvement emerge in this context, the stakes escalate dramatically. Suddenly, Hollywood decisions are not just about perception within an industry. They may affect international reputation, alliances, and influence. Every observer starts asking the same question: how much of this is about money, and how much is about loyalty, trust, and strategy? Now, consider the psychological dimension. Royals live under constant public gaze, but their private dealings are tightly controlled. Financial strain or obligations that intersect with influential figures in Hollywood can create stress that is invisible to the public but palpable behind closed doors. Rumors, even unverified, act as pressure points.